Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new hardware review today with the Racing Wheel Apex made by Hori. This was sent to us by the people at Hori and I'd like to thank them very much for the opportunity to review this wheel and for letting me keep this so I can play more racing games with it and maybe do that stream with Dark Souls played on a racing wheel. This is compatible with PC, with PlayStation 3 and with PlayStation 4, so it basically has you covered unless you own an Xbox. It also costs a bit more than the Trust GXT288 that I reviewed last time, and well, does it justify that price with its performance? Stay tuned and find out. First thing up, let's talk about the build quality, which is a step up in certain terms from the Trust GXT288 and also a bit of a step down, as you may see from the fact that it doesn't have a stick shift. If you want to change gears, you're gonna have to use the flappy gear pads, which are very large, so you can use them from just about every angle, though they don't appear to be necessarily made out of a lot of plastic, so I fear that if you hit them by mistake with enough force they may snap off, though that hasn't happened to me, and in normal usage you should have no problems with them. You may also notice that the rubber bit is actually made from more rubber and not that plastic that sort of looks like rubber that the other wheel had. It gives it a better texture, it makes it feel a bit more realistic, a bit more immersive if you will. It's a very nice feature to have. Also, a very nice feature indeed is this thing, like I mentioned in the unboxing. This red little thing will make it a lot more easier to notice exactly when you have the wheels centered. You may actually see that this thing is on a lot of the wheels in certain racing games, like in the cars themselves, to let you know exactly when you've centered the wheel. It's actually a very nice thing to see when you're trying to figure out if you have the exact sensitivity set to mimic exactly what you're doing on the screen as well. It's a very nice thing to have. Something else to note is that this wheel does not have a thumbstick like the other one had, so you don't have any actual mini joysticks on the front of it at all. If you want to use them, you're gonna have to use the switch on the back, like you have a switch that lets you change from the functionality of the D-pad from being a D-pad to being the left thumbstick and being the right thumbstick. You can do this on the fly in any game, but you can't have it be a D-pad and a stick at the same time. You're gonna have to choose, and that might be a bit of a problem in games that require you to both have the D-pad active to control something like autolog in Need for Speed Most Wanted, and you know, left stick so you can see your camera, or right stick to move the camera around your car. Yeah, that's a bit of a downside. Something else that may be a bit of a downside as well is the placement of the buttons. I'm not necessarily that enthusiastic about how L1, R1, L3 and R3 are placed. They're a bit too high and it's kind of inconvenient to use them, so maybe not map anything useful to them. I was initially gonna place something like NOS on them, but no, it's just not as comfortable and not as useful, especially since I'm mostly gonna play on my hands like this, and I can have access to these buttons and not you're gonna have to change your hands around a lot to be able to use them properly. They're not that well placed, but these things sort of are, like L2 and R2 are a lot better placed than they were on the Trust GXT288, because these ones are actually progressive, so you could actually use these properly for acceleration and braking, as they have multiple steps in their progression. Press them at the bottom a bit and you will see a different kind of intensity to them than you would see if you were to press them in the middle or above. They're not necessarily as fine in terms of sensitivity as the pedals, but they are good enough to the point where you can actually play with just them and not have the pedals connected. The pedals themselves are a step up in certain ways from the Trust ones as well. For example, the brake pad, the brake pedal does not have resistance to it, not enough resistance to actually require you to push the pedal so hard that the whole thing moves around. It's a bit more accessible, and because it doesn't have resistance, you instantly know when you're pressing it. Like, there is no dead zone to it that will sort of deceive you and you wouldn't know exactly if you press the brake or not. Acceleration is just fine, it doesn't have that much resistance to it as well. One thing to note, there isn't as much travel in the pedals as on the Trust steering wheel, but those didn't actually have that much travel in software either, so yeah, it sort of evens out. One thing to note, that the rubber on these pedals is thicker, it's textured, and unless you don't clean your floor, it will stick even to some of the more shiny floors like mine. So yeah, in terms of build quality, it's a step up in certain terms, and because you don't have a gear shift and you don't have a thumbstick, it's also a bit of a step down. But again, I like things like this thing that lets you see exactly when your wheel is centered, and these buttons are very nice to have if you want progressive touch to your thumbs to accelerate and brake, but they may be actually a bit too well placed. Like it would have been a bit better if they were placed on the inside of the wheel, like right here, because on the sides you're in danger of pressing them by accident when you're turning fast especially, and you may end up accidentally braking or accelerating to the nearest wall in the middle of a race, and that's not something you would want to see. Something else you may not have wanted to see is the way that the wheel clips onto surfaces. You have two options. You can either use suction cups, there's 5 of them, you can stick them on the bottom, and well, I have a disc with a sort of wood texture on it that has microscopic grooves from the wood texture, and that makes the suction cups completely useless. And the standard gripping mechanism, the one that comes with a big screw, that's a bit more difficult to put on and take off than the truss model. It does the job. Like this thing, once you bolt it in properly, will stick with no problems, but getting off and on again is a bit more difficult, and it's not as flexible. Also, the wheel is a bit higher position than the truss one, so if you're leaning a bit back when you're playing games and your monitors are on the disc right in front of you, not a bit higher up like I have mine, you may not actually be able to see the bottom half or just half your monitor. So my suggestion, if you're going to use this on a desk, on a PC, and you do have a tray for the keyboard, place it on that tray, because otherwise it's a bit too high to actually be able to see properly. Now let's get down to the actual performance. Is this wheel, even though it lacks a stick shift and the thumbstick, is it worth the $100 price? Well, it kind of does. Remember when I said that the Trust GX888, I wouldn't recommend that wheel for simulators, but it was okay for arcade games? Well, this one is bordering on me saying that yeah, you can use this with simulators. Because I've used this with simulators. I've played Richard Burns Rally on it. It worked. Like, I wasn't necessarily superb at it because the pedals, again, they're okay, but they don't have the same granularity as something from a kit that costs about 3 times as much as this thing does. But the steering wheel itself, like the steering itself, that was good. Like, I even played Dirt 3 and there were no issues with me slamming into every tree and every wall. Driving with this was actually easy and accurate, mostly because it has something that the Trust one advertised but sort of didn't have. This one has 270 degrees of motion, and it can use all of them. You can set it to use just 180 if you want to be a bit more snappy, a bit more quick in your turning, but you can set it in the software, like on the wheel itself, to use 270 degrees, and yeah, it actually uses all of them, and that changes, like absolutely changes the way you drive. One thing to note is that by default, when you install it, this thing is recognized as a controller, but in parentheses it does say that this is the Racing Wheel Apex, so it's not a generic controller. When you boot up Windows, or if you leave it on for some time and don't use it, it will sort of snap into a direct input mode where the pedals don't work, just the steering, but I'm guessing that's more of a bug because you can't actually use it well in that mode because, you know, there's no acceleration from the pedals. So you'll use it mostly in the mode that's trying to emulate a gamepad, but it does it very well. Like, it behaves more akin to a steering wheel than a gamepad. Keep in mind, I've only tested this on the PC. I have not had the chance to test on the PlayStation platform, but it does have some compatibility features for the PlayStation platform. For example, you can set it to work with PS3, with the PlayStation 4 for normal mode, or with PlayStation 4 in steering mode, which sort of, I'm guessing, allows it to behave more like a steering wheel in that on that platform. On the PC, it will just work basically like a game controller, but one that has really good steering, because again, 207 degrees of movement, which are all counted by those 65,000 ticks, those 65,000 degrees of steps of motion detection, whereas direct input only has 256 of those input points. Having that full range of motion really does change things, because I was used to driving with the thrust wheel, and switching to this, I basically had to relearn how to drive, because there's so much more range to the car now. There's so much more possibility with turning the wheel all the way to the other side and turning very sharply into a hairpin turn. It's a much more granular experience. Again, it's not something that's, well, comparable to a wheel that can do a 540 rotation or a 720, but it's still something better than the 180 to 190 that the thrust wheel had. Also, if you're not actually liking the way that the wheel is behaving, you can change the settings using the buttons on the surface. Oh, and by the way, keep this manual handy, because you will need it in order to actually understand exactly how you can change the dead zone and the sensitivity. Speaking of dead zone, you can set this to not have one, so any sort of motion you do, even here, like even the slightest, can be registered. But if you want to have a bit more leniency, you can set it using the predefined key combinations that are listed in the manual. And one thing to note, if the people at Hori are watching this, the manual is wrong. It says that I'm supposed to switch the D-pad to RS in order to change the sensitivity. But if I change it to RS, the LED that's supposed to show me the exact step of sensitivity I'm at doesn't light up. It does light up when I'm switching this to DP, however. I've looked through the manual, it doesn't seem to say that DP should actually switch something, should actually be a setting for sensitivity or something else. I've looked at the online manual as well, it's the same thing, so I'm guessing that maybe that's a mistake, and one of them is supposed to be, RS is supposed to be either LS, like for left stick, or it's supposed to be the DP for D-pad. But if you don't want to mess with the settings, that's okay. At default, it's sort of stuck somewhere in the middle. This thing has 7 steps of sensitivity that you can change, and you'll notice that the LED changes from green to white depending on which sensitivity you're at. The default 4 is okay for me, like it was very good. I set it to the lowest sensitivity possible at one time to see exactly how it behaves. It was a different kind of experience, but the default one was okay for me. You can also change the sensitivity of the pedals too, so you can get them to be more responsive, to be a bit more aggressive, or you can set them to have a bit more leniency to them and then just activate it at their fullest when you're hitting the pedal to the metal. It's your choice. The firmware lets you customize this to a very large degree. Being that it also functions as a gamepad, it does have vibration to it, but again, it's just vibration, it's not force feedback. You won't necessarily feel the tug of the engine, the tug of the drivetrain, the wheels trying to fight against you when you're turning, but you know, it's vibration, it works most of the time. It won't be something that knocks your socks off, but hey, it's a functional feature, so why not enjoy it? And I gotta say that I did enjoy this wheel. Like every racing game I tried with it, apart from the crew, because the crew still does not want to recognize this like in any way, shape or form. I don't know what's wrong with that game. Every one of the games I've tested worked well. Like even Forza Horizon 3, I was sort of fiddling with the settings on the wheel while I was playing it, so I ended up crashing quite a bit into, well, everything until I got it set up properly. It was quite playable. And the game I mostly play with wheels, Grid Autosport, was a dream to play with this. Controls were superb, like with little to no assistance, controls were quite good, and there 3 as well, like I mentioned, it worked well, I was not slamming into everything, and it worked well even in F1 2000, F1 99 to 2003, that's the game that I mostly use to test exactly how well wheels work. It's the one made by the people that also created the R Factor, which I do have on a disc, but I don't have a disc tray on this PC, so I can actually install that one, but I don't the one I had. And it again also worked well enough, like the steering worked well enough in Richard Burns Rally, which is one of the best simulators to have ever been made. Yeah, it's a wheel that I am very close to recommending to people that are even into simulators. And for the price of $100, yeah, for something that can be used in a simulator, it's not bad. Like, not bad at all. Again, the mechanism used to grapple this to the desk could have been better. Like, I'm gonna have to unscrew that screw and then put it back in if I want to just slide it over to the opposite side of the desk. The suction cups don't work, there's no stick to it, like there's no thumbstick, there's no stick shift. It does have trade-offs. Trade-offs in terms of functionality, trade-offs in terms of ease of use, trade-offs in terms of, well, just those. But it does give you better performance than the Trust GX-D288 in terms of actual racing. And the pedals they're better. Like, the pedals are flat out better. They may not necessarily go all the way to the bottom, and they're a bit high up, so it's best if you just place them as back as possible and you sort of recline into them. Yeah, this is the kind of wheel that would be just as home in a one of those racing setups, like those racing cages, as it would be under your desk. It's built more inclined to be one of those things that's built into a racing cage, like the racing wheels, the racing setups where you just bolt this down to a frame and just sit back in a chair and have the racing wheel, the pedals bolted to the far end of the setup. So yeah, they're sort of more inclined to be a bit more professional in terms of their design, but they're usable under the desk as well. Well, that would be it for the review of the Hori Racing Wheel Apex. It is a fine racing wheel, again, may lack some features, but it does make up for them with its performance, at least in terms of steering. The pedals, again, are easier to use than the ones on the Trust model, but they basically have the same kind of sensitivity, like they're not full range, as I would say, and there's no clutch, unless you want to, I don't know, put clutch on one of these buttons that's kind of hard to reach. You can find us in shops for around $100. Again, it works with PC, it works with PlayStation 3, with PlayStation 4, and it's, yeah, it may even be suitable for simulators. A lot more than the Trust one is. It's actually been quite okay driving games that are more inclined to be simulators than just arcade ones, and it's been an okay experience. Well, that'll be it for this review, I'm guessing, so I'll see you soon with something else, probably a couple of keyboards, because we still do have quite a lot of them left to review, and then I'm going to have to do something about the Raid Max case. You've probably already seen the video where I just lit up the LEDs using the other PSU. If you haven't, I'm probably gonna post it soon. Well, Raul is, I'm just gonna make the video. And well, we'll see you around with more racing wheels, maybe, who knows? Racing wheels, they could be a thing, we do quite often, we'll see. And more reviews of other things. And again, a big thanks to the people at Hori for giving me this wheel and letting me test it and keep it. So, see you soon again, and goodbye. Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.